All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee Talk. I'm your host, Neil Sass. On this show, we talk about soil and livestock and diversity and covers, no disturbance and roots throughout the year. You know, no big whoop, just coffee talk. So we got some nice rain this week. Frost is going out in most places. I looked at the forecast for next week. I saw a 68 on there somewhere, so it's going to get nice and warm. Cover crops are really going to start greening up quickly, and some farmers are going to start getting antsy to terminate their cover crops. So today we're going to talk about cover crop goals and biomass considerations for achieving these goals. We'll hit on termination timing and delaying termination timing, and also some cash crop planting setups and planter considerations. So, or more briefly, as the clever Grundy County folks put it, getting more out of your cover crops should have been my title, I think, for this week. But so for today, we have an excellent agenda. I'm going to start. I'll briefly share some biomass study info, and then we'll really get in the thick of it with Jacob Groth, the resource team lead in Decorah, and Todd Duncan, the DC from Winneshiek County. They're also farmers, and they're going to share some of the experiences that they've had on their own farms. So as we get going here, feel free to ask questions. Use the chat box is probably the best. You can raise your hand as well if you want. So I'm going to get rolling.
Yep, Neil, you went mute.
Oops, sorry. Thanks, Todd. Too many screens. So the question is, how much biomass do I need to achieve my goal? And I've got just a few goals listed here. This is certainly not all the goals. You know, I think there may be more goals than there are cover crop species. So this list could be hundreds of things long. I'm just going to hit on a few. You know, and none of these are mutually exclusive. So you could have several goals and not just one. So keep that in mind. I'm going to talk about the goals individually, but they are not individual. So the first one, weed suppression, this is just a meta-analysis of studies. So it's a study of studies, you know, and they looked at all these different things, these topics in the column on the left, and I put stars by the ones on the right that were statistically significant. So biomass, cover crop type, sowing season, fall versus spring, seeding rate, you know, 1 times versus 3 times. And this one, there was only 3 studies done in this one. So keep that in mind as we get into Jake's stuff. Termination time, and then lastly, integrated weed management. So, you know, if you're using one or additional method, so this one is with or without herbicides, or as these folks put in their study, the effectiveness of weed suppression is largely due to management. So that's a theme that we'll keep throughout here. The next thing they looked at was cover crop species, and I'm just briefly, the red line means little effect. So, you know, if you put a mono planting of buckwheat or pea, you know, as that dot and whisker plot shows, it goes over the red line. So that doesn't provide much effect. But as you get down near the bottom of the list to the green ones, the greens are grasses and the blues are broadleafs. Some of these grasses provided much more weed suppression effect, and cereal rye looked like it was the best one, according to this study. The next one they looked at, termination time. So for their study, they just split it up by at least 2 weeks difference. So again, the dot and whisker thing, the one goes over the red line. So early termination really didn't provide much weed suppression benefit, but late, and that's at least 2 weeks later, provided a lot more of a response for weed suppression. So that's good. And then, so just a summary, They're largely due to management factors, all the things I had green stars by at the start, and if you summarized it even more to just two things, it would be cereal rye and delaying it. So keep that in mind. So we pit cereal rye versus one of the nastiest weeds out there, Palmer amaranth. And as you kind of look, how much biomass do you need to really start getting some weed suppression benefits? As you get up to 7,500 pounds, you're really getting some really good weed suppression control. So if you think about Palmer amaranth and how tough it is versus some of the other common weeds that we have, it kind of gives you an idea of how well it does against the hardweed. It'll do, that well against some of the other weeds as well. The next goal is end scavenging. So why do we need end scavenging? So if you look at these little bell graphs, and the demand, so it's basically asynchrony. So the demand for nitrogen by plants doesn't fit exactly on top of, when nitrogen is going to be available in the soil. So, the corn is growing, mid-May to early September, but the soil is mineralizing nitrogen by microbes, and also there's fertilizer out there. All that stuff in the gray, that's available for loss. So if we could fit a cover crop in there, and we can quite easily, we're going to, help scavenge some of that free nitrogen and prevent it from being lost. So here's just a chart from this study. As you go across the bottom is more biomass, and as you go up and down, it's reducing leaching. So, and this is a different unit, it's milligrams per hectare, but it's not that much different than pounds per acre. So, it sort of maximizes there at around 6 milligrams per hectare, which again, it's close to pounds per acre, which would be about 6,000. Actually, I think it's a little less. So that's a very 6,000 pounds per acre of biomass is a very achievable goal. That's where it's maximizing nitrogen scavenging. So to put it a little differently, more biomass equals nutrient uptake. So the more you see above, the more nitrogen that it is taking up, that it's scavenging. And one of the studies I referenced below, depending on the stage of the plant, it is 2 to 2.5% of the biomass is scavenged nitrogen. So if you have 1,000 pounds of acre of dry biomass, you'll have 20 to 25 pounds per acre of scavenged N. And then on the very bottom, so if we synergize both weed suppression and nitrogen scavenging, this could be part of an integrated pest management plan. So there's weeds that love nitrogen, and having that free nitrogen, that asynchrony thing that I showed earlier, amaranth, pigweed, lamb's quarter, or water hemp, those are all amaranth species. Chickweed, hembit, and lamb's quarters are also nitrogen-loving weeds. So if we're scavenging in, it's not available for weeds. We're also suppressing them with our cover crop biomass. Erosion control, as you talk to producers, this is probably their main goal, or the main reason they start doing cover crops. And we've understood the erosion control benefits for a long time. This chart and picture came from Tom Casper. He's an ARSS soil scientist in Ames. He's retired now, but he studied this for years. And he's got a lot of great data. I'd encourage you to look it up if you want more, but a no cover crop versus an odor or rye cover crop provides significant erosion control benefits. Grazing as a goal. So with grazing, you really need to consider, is that your only goal? And grazing can be a great goal. It's cost effective, it adds value, it's good for soil biology and nutrient management. If it's your only goal, you're after plant material and forage and tonnage and all just quantities. So the more you can grow, the better. But if you have other goals, you consider waiting a little bit before you turn the cows out or the sheep or whatever to graze. You have wet soil conditions and weather and different things, but also cover crop species selection. Some will start growing sooner than others. And Jake may touch on this a bit. And then, forage quality. I've heard farmers say their cows love this species. They'll eat this one first and this one second and this one third. And I think that, and I'm not a forage person at all, but I think that goes into forage quality. Increasing soil organic matter or building carbon in the soil. This is a hot topic. It's a very complex topic. The more carbon you can sequester and capture in a cover crop is good. So the more the better. But also, this was eye-opening to me. Consider how much the stuff you can't see, the below ground stuff, contributes. So above ground, so this is relative contribution on the chart on the right. Above ground does contribute, but the below ground contributes significantly more. So the litter on the top and the root exudates, there's not really a lot different in that, in the relative quantities, but the root turnover is really where it's at as far as pumping carbon in the soil. So again, more above ground biomass that you visually see equals more roots below ground as well. And it changes by stage, but that's just a simple rule of thumb to think of. And then lastly, diversity and live roots, I lumped them together, but diversity is the least understood of our 5 soil health principles, but it's likely the most important. And so this chart just kind of shows root exudates of different plant species, and their rate in the soil, and then and this was actually done in a pasture, but in an undegraded, moderately, in a severely degraded soil. So but if you think about the rooting structures of different species, the winter hardies versus the non-winter hardies, and how much is above and how much is below, and brassicas versus legumes versus grasses. There's a lot of things going on, but again, how much we see above still affects how much we see below. And then in summary, so this is just 2 things. Meeting goals, again, like we started out, is largely due to management, and more biomass equals more goals. So this is just a picture of my parents and my kids. We started doing this a few years ago. We took a picture when we terminated the cover crops. This was from 2019. It got pretty tall, so it's just kind of a fun picture for me. And with that, I'm going to transition to Jake. So I will unshare my screen. And Jake, you can go ahead and share yours as I introduce you. So next up, we have Jacob Groth. Jake is a resource team lead in Decorah. He's a farmer. And if you've ever seen him in a hunting or fishing picture, you know what awesome looks like. While his taste in sports teams leaves room for improvement, his passion for soil health is as good as it gets. This morning, Jake is going to be talking to us about measuring biomass, about growth rates, growing degree days, and other cover crop observations. The floor is yours, Jake.
Okay, I assume you can see my screen. Would that be correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're gonna hit on how to achieve some of those cover crop goals, and so we kind of titled this "Let It Grow: Accumulating Biomass and Benefits of Cover Crops." And a lot of the information that's going to get presented today is stuff that data that was collected while I was in RC with Jared SEAL Team 6. So it was me, Neil, Jared, Roger, Tina, Aaron Anderson collected some data. Katie, you'll help collect data. I know I'm missing quite a few people, but a lot of this is part of a team effort from what we had done a couple years ago. And I don't know if I can. Okay, so typically when we give this talk, we call it nerding out with cover crops, because we get kind of into the weeds with some of the stuff that we're doing while we're trying to collect this data. So kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about cereal rye growth, spring seeded oat growth, then management implications, talking about maybe when to terminate, the weed management, disease management, and then at the end, if we got time, we'll talk about what does it take to actually build some soil organic matter. And I got this picture in here just because, you see Gabe Brown or Dave Brandt talk, and they are, you can tell that they're credible speakers because they got some large brassica in their hand. So you can see by the size of this radish, I might be credible. So some of the information that we tried to look at with cereal rye when we were collecting data was what's more important with getting cereal rye biomass maximized? Is it seeding rate, seeding date, plants per foot a row, how it's tillering or allowing it to grow and accumulating as many growing degree days as possible? So we did a project that started in the fall of 2016 after soybean harvest, and we did 2 different seeding rates on 2 different dates. So basically, we did 60 pounds cereal rye October 11th, and then half that rate on the same day, then repeated the seeding rates 3 weeks later on October 31st. The interesting thing is that the half rate currently doesn't meet our standards and specs. And actually, that October 31st seeding date didn't meet our standards and specs for cover crop for northern Iowa until we changed the standard here a few weeks ago. So then starting in the spring, we went out 4 days in the spring and took pictures of the biomass, measured it, and then also did clippings of the biomass to get an idea of how quickly that rye was growing. And you can see on this set of photos right here, this is both 60-pound seeding rate, but this is the only difference is 3 weeks in difference in the term seeding date. So the stuff that was seeded early October is already pushing 2,000 pounds of biomass, where that stuff seeded on Halloween was only just shy of 400 pounds of biomass. So that early seeding date is a huge difference in how quickly that biomass was starting to accumulate in the spring. And you can visually tell in the picture right there. Then when we went back out May 1st, that early seeding date, it was about 18 inches tall, and we were measuring about 4,200 pounds of biomass, where that late seeded stuff was about a quarter of that, just shy of 1,400 pounds of biomass. May 22nd, the amount of biomass had increased a lot. Remember before on that early seeding date, we're at 4,200 pounds. Now we're 2 weeks later and at over 11,000 pounds. So the amount of biomass that was getting accumulated through May was enormous. And the same as even for that late seeded stuff, it's starting to catch up. And then May 29th, this is when we planted beans into this field. That early seeded stuff was pushing 13,000 pounds of biomass and was a pretty thick stand of rye. And actually that late seeded, the biomass reduced a little bit. We don't know if that's from a sampling error, but what we did notice is that rye starts to flower out. Some of the tillers and leaves that were not viable were dying off and sloughing off. So that might account for some of that decrease in biomass. But 7,000 pounds of biomass is still a pretty good quantity of biomass. And then there's a picture of me standing in it just so you kind of got a visual of what that looks like. This is a video. I'm assuming it's playing that we set a trail camera up November 14th and then had it take photos about every day through the growing season until July 30th. But you can see rye as it plays, the rye hits a point where it really, really starts to go really fast. And then we terminated it, and then the rye dies off. And then eventually it takes a little bit, but the beans do grow up through that rye as we get through into the summer. And then by the end of July, that's what that field shoulder high rye looks like. The beans have come on pretty good with that. So with the measurements that we took, we looked at plants per foot of row. We looked at number of tillers. We looked at all kinds of other metrics. And realistically, what this cobbled up lines shows is that seeding rate didn't have a huge effect on the number of plants that we had per foot of row. There might be a higher number of plants early on, but then some of the plants get outcompeted and seem to die off. Plants per acre, initially higher seeding rates equal to higher plant population, but then later on the number of plants that we were finding out there were actually equalized as some plants got outcompeted. Biomass, typically a lot of producers are terminating their cover crops, somewhere between mid-April to early May so they can get out there and plant corn. And mid-April, the early seeded high seeding rate had more biomass than the early seeded lower seeding rate, and it by far outcompeted the later seeding dates. But if you notice on those from the graph there on the right, that October 11th seeding date as we got closer to May 1st, the amount of biomass out there was almost the same. They pretty much equalized. In that lower seeding rate, or the late seeding date, the biomass really wasn't all that different between the high rate and the low rate. So we did put together a growth curve based on that rye biomass accumulation and plotted them with the late and the early. And when you look at it, we have that red line on there. That's May 1st. And so biomass accumulation from late February through the end of April is actually fairly slow. But then the rye hits the accelerator in May and it starts to rapidly grow once we get into early to mid-May. And I know it's kind of a exponential growth, and this is fairly typical in a lot of plant species, especially the grasses, that they have a slow vegetative growth stage, and then they hit a rapid period of growth and biomass accumulation. So if you can look at this chart and kind of go, wow, I'm going to grow 1 million pounds of rye out there by the middle of June. But 2019, we did some biomass sampling in a field in Chickasaw County, and this was rye that was taken for grain production. So we started the 5th of May and went through the middle of July, and we had we saw that same rapid growth phase through early May to mid to late May, and then once we hit that first part of June, the biomass accumulation pretty much stopped as that rye seeded out and started to flower and develop seed. And one thing with rye physiologies is that it's going to flower typically based on photo period and also how much time it has to grow. So typically, no matter when it was planted in the fall, that rye is actually going to start to show its seed heads and stuff like that about right around the 25th of May or so, give or take a week. And then once that happens, it's going to accumulate some biomass for maybe another week or so, but then it's going to kind of die back or stop accumulating biomass and start focusing on producing seed. This chart looks at the rate of growing degree day accumulation. If you're not familiar with the concept of growing degree days, it's basically how warm it is versus a relative temperature. And corn growth and a lot of other species its growth rate can be predicted based on that rate of growing degree day accumulation. So you look at the blue dots, that's the number of growing degree days that we accumulated from October 1st through the end of May while we're collecting this data. And you can see that those blue dots really get close to zero once we get into late October, early November. And virtually there is no growing degree day accumulation for rye pretty much December through mid to late March. There's a few warm days here or there, but if it's covered up in snow and frozen ground, it's not really going to grow. But then once we get back into April and May, those growing degree days really start to accumulate rapidly. And that's where May starts to become fairly important with our cover crops and how much biomass that we're going to accumulate. Because we're also, in addition to the getting warmer temperatures, we're also getting much longer day length as we go through May and into June. So the interesting thing that we found was that the rye biomass that was growing is dang near correlates very, very well with the number of heat units that rye has to accumulate from the time that it's seeded to the time that it's terminated, whether it's seeded early in October or later in October. It's just when you get it seeded early in October, it can accumulate those heat units quicker and get more growth and more biomass development earlier in the spring. The late seeded stuff is just going to take a little bit longer in the spring to get going, but it does have the ability to close that gap. This chart here is fairly busy, but I guess the concept here is, if we want to maximize rye biomass, from what we've been showing before, is okay, you don't terminate that rye until the 1st of June. But realistically, we're doing these cover crops into before a cash crop. So, the farmers do have to be profitable at some point. And so there needs to be a balance between how quickly you're accumulating that biomass and what it can do to your crop yield. And so the yellow line on this chart is this is Iowa State information on planting date versus the percent of corn yield potential. So typically, once you start getting past the 5th of May or so, you start to get a drop off on what your corn yield potential is. And if you wait until the 3rd of June, you're looking at about 75% of your max corn yield versus if you had planted in late April. But at that same time period as that corn yield potential is going down, the rye biomass accumulation is increasing rapidly. So the producer needs to figure out where their happy medium is going to be. Are they willing to sacrifice some yield or a little bit of yield or a lot of yield to get that biomass going? And that's a discussion for the producer. So, if we're looking at corn planting dates, this is April 14th, 1,900 pounds of biomass versus 400 pounds with that late seeding. That 1,900 pounds is going to provide some benefits, but as far as weed suppression and that, it's probably not going to do a whole heck of a lot. In this particular year, by waiting until May 1st, we would have been able to get 4,200 pounds of biomass accumulation for that early seeding versus 1,400 pounds. So, delaying that termination date from April 14th to May 1st doesn't really reduce the amount of corn yield potential, but it does allow that rye biomass to nearly triple during that 2-week window. So this basically just talks about 95% corn yield potential May 10th, 90% corn yield potential May 15th. So that corn yield potential does start dropping rapidly in May, while the rye biomass is increasing very rapidly as well. Soybeans are kind of do the same type of thing. That brown line shows the soybean yield potential, but it doesn't drop off nearly as much as corn. So delaying soybean planting date or planting green into the cover crop earlier, you can allow that rye to grow and then maximize the biomass of that rye as much as possible. So, looking at planting cereal rye on May 22nd or May 29th, waiting a little bit longer before terminating that rye does allow a fair amount more biomass to accumulate. But if you can get a field that looks like that on May 22nd, you've accomplished something with that. So rye biomass, like I said, accumulates very rapidly in May. So we go from 40% of our maximum biomass accumulation on May 15th to 70% by May 25th. That 10-day window, the rye biomass may increase as much as it did in the previous 250 days, 15 days combined. So delaying that termination through the month of May is where we can add a lot of biomass and get a lot of the different benefits of the rye. And here we got a picture of some soybean seedlings coming up through the rye. So this is what that field looked like through 2017, planted on May 29th. As you can tell by the picture, it was fairly tall on that tractor. We terminated June 1st, and then by June 29th or June 24th, the field was dead. If you look carefully, you can see some soybeans coming up, but the neighbors are looking at us pretty funny by that stage and wondering what we had done out there. But my dog would run out there and kick up pheasants, and deer were bedding in it as well, so it was providing some wildlife habitat. By July 17th, the soybeans started growing fairly well and up through the rye, and then by the time we got to the end of July, it looked like a pretty good soybean field. And that was the only herbicide that we did that year was a single pass of glyphosate, and had pretty dang good weed control. By the end of September, we did have a few plants to lamb's quarters pop up here and there, but didn't really do anything to affect the yield. They were just popped up through that canopy late. So another thing that we looked at was spring seeded oats. So this was done in 2019. We broadcast oats with potash fertilizer on May 3rd, planted the soybeans on May 14th, and on the left you can see what the oats look like. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot there to really see. By the end of May, May 26th, it was still looking pretty feeble and pathetic, to be perfectly honest. But we didn't terminate the oats that year until the 21st of June. And what occurred in June kind of amazed me. May 31st, yeah, there's beans reemerging and the oats are up there a little bit. But by June 3rd, we had about 600 pounds of biomass and 8-inch tall oats. And okay, it was looking like we were going to accomplish something. June 13th, in the 10-day period, we had added another 1,500 pounds of biomass. So we were 15-inch tall oats, and we were with 1,800 pounds of biomass measured. And then by June 18th, we had accumulated another 800 pounds of biomass just in a 5-day window it was about 20 inches tall, and you can see those soybeans were starting to grow up fairly tall as well. We terminated on June 21st, and by June 25th, it kind of looked like a mess out there. The neighbors were looking at us kind of funny when they drove by and would ask questions. But by July 4th, the oat material had pretty well, it had died and was standing dead, and then the beans were starting to grow. And again, by July 30th, we had pretty much a solid stand of soybeans out there with very, very few weeds. The other interesting thing is August 8th, we pulled a couple plants out. The plant on the left there with the red circle, that was where we had oats broadcast. The other plant was we didn't have any oats on that area. And what we noticed was that we're getting a lot more pods per node on that soybean plant where we had oats. There's some soil health benefits with mycorrhizal fungi out there, but I think we talked to other producers that have noticed the same as well, where they have had a yield bump with the oat cover crop ahead of soybeans. So when we're talking about some of the other benefits of delayed termination with cover crops, I mentioned weed management. Another potential thing is white mold, which is a disease that affects soybeans. This is the picture on the left was taken on, I guess, May 11th, 2016. It was right before we planted soybeans. And then the picture on the right is a yield monitor from that map or from that field. And during the summer, there was some white mold issues that popped up in that field that I knew was going to ding the soybean yield, and it did. But then I was going through photos after harvest, I noticed this picture that had the annual ryegrass, and the field had been broadcast at V4 with urea and then a annual ryegrass cover crop with some other species. And the annual ryegrass, depending on temperature, snow, other things, may or may not overwinter. Well, in this field, we had portions of the field overwintered, other portions did not. The interesting thing is where the annual ryegrass overwintered and provided crop canopy over that ground, it suppressed the white mold, and you could see it on the yield monitor. So the blue box on the left, it correlates with the blue box on the yield monitor map, and then the red area that's circled, it correlates with the red area on the yield monitor. And that difference in yield, we're looking at, on that blue area, we're anywhere from 65 to 70, 80 bushel soybeans. And then with the yellow and the red dots, we're anywhere from 5 to low 50s on that soybean yield. And realistically, that's a 20 bushel soybean yield difference, and the only difference on that field was the annual ryegrass was on those areas. When we sold beans that year for $10 a bushel, that's a $200 an acre net profit from having that cover crop on that field. Also mentioned one of the other goals, what does it take to increase soil organic matter by 0.1%? I know we kind of got this 1% challenge to try to increase our soil's organic matter by 1%, but what does it take to do 0.1%? There's won't get too much into the math on it, but there's an NRCS publication that says that it takes about 200,000 pounds of plant residue to increase soil organic matter 1%. So if we do that to 1/10, we need to add an additional 20,000 pounds of plant residue. So if we got a producer that's a corn bean rotation and they terminate their rye at about 8 inches of height, so roughly 1,000 pounds of biomass. If you add in the below ground biomass, you're about 1,500 pounds per year. It'll take about 13 years to get that additional 200,000 pounds of plant residue. If we take a different scenario, or same scenario where you got a corn soybean rotation, but you terminate the rye when it's about 4,000 pounds of above ground biomass, so including the roots, roughly 6,000 pounds total biomass, and then terminate the rye when you have 10,000 pounds of above ground biomass, so 15,000 total pounds, you'll get that additional 20,000 pounds of plant residue in 2 years rather than the 13 years. So if producers have the goal of increasing soil organic matter, the delayed termination, they'll achieve it a heck of a lot quicker than terminating these cover crops early. And then these are soil test results from our farm. Starting off in 2009 to 2018, we started off at about 2.5% soil organic matter. And in 2018, the average across 26 sampling areas that were the same as what they were in 2009 were just shy of 3.4% organic matter. So some of these benefits can be seen over the long term. It's not going to be instantly over time, but it seems like that organic matter in the soil starts to accumulate much quicker as you get more into the system. So the take-home points: seed early if you can, and then let it grow. Then producer has to find a balance between their cash crop yield potential and cover crop growth. And I guess the main take-home point is, Neil came up with this one: May makes matter, organic matter, that is. I like to deer hunt. November is a very important month with the rut. You know, people like to duck hunt or whatever. November is an important month. Well, when it comes to cover crops and accumulating biomass, May is probably the most important month out of the year for our producers to do that. And with that, I will turn it over to Neil again.
That was awesome, man. Thanks, Jake. There is a few questions in there. If you want to just answer them in the chat box, I think that'd be best. We'll keep it moving here. Todd, why don't you go ahead and share your screen, and I'll introduce you here. So, batting cleanup for the day here, we have Todd Duncan. Todd is the district conservationist for Winneshiek County. He's a corn, bean, cover crop, maybe some other things farmer in Iowa and in Illinois, where his family farm is at. He's also a heck of a pumpkin farmer. So this morning, Todd is going to be talking about planting green, planting into high residue, some planter considerations and setup stuff, nutrient management. Didn't know that one, Sean. Todd, whenever you're ready, we'll let you take it away.
Like Neil said, I've been on farm up here. I've been farming for about 5 years up here, doing the cover crop and no-till. Also farming with my dad. My dad has been no-tilling for 25 years, and now we're doing a lot of cover crops down there. So I'm going to jump back and forth between the two to share some experiences. So this was in June 3rd of 2019. No-tilling here in cereal rye and winter wheat. This was fall drilled, about 60 pounds per acre. This is what we would call a Kinsey planter with the inner plants. So in this picture, I'm planting both. Both front and back row units are running here right now. So some of the consideration is making sure your planter's level, so you're getting consistent depth on it. And we'll show another picture of what a row unit looks like. And also when you're planting, you can see that the front row units there are following your tire tracks, and then the tire tracks of the planter are following the front row units. So you may have to make some adjustments to how those row units are performing when you're planting green. So 2019 was a wet year in Illinois, so that's the reason for the late planting date. I got my corn in April, and it wasn't until June 3rd that we were able to get rolling again. We were about ready to take prevent plant. It wasn't, it of course looks like a beautiful day here, but we were still on, it wasn't ideal conditions and rain in the forecast, but we decided to go with it. You know, without the cover crop, this field would have been fallow or worse yet, grown up to weeds. So basically the cover crop helped dry this field out, was harvesting sunlight to build organic matter. You know, I think we can all agree that was a good thing. You know, some will twist this later termination of these cover crops that'll over dry the field and take moisture from the commodity crop, but the roots on the cover crop have opened up pore space, increased the water holding capacity, build organic matter. The plant is mostly water, of course, and with the root system being mostly water. And then, of course, when you do terminate your cover crop, it's going to help the canopy, it's going to help shade the ground from drying out, and will add surface residue to further conserve residue or moisture. So I think we can all agree that's a good thing, and could spend money on tile, but I'd rather spend it on green here and growing my soil health. Here's just a picture of the row unit of a typical row unit. You'll hear comments from producers have a lot of different opinions. The good thing about attachments on the planter is there's a lot of them. The bad thing about attachments on the planter is there's a lot of them. So this is my typical setup here. You've got your row cleaners in the front with a no-till calder. There you got your double disc openers with your depth wheel there on your planter, along with your closing wheels in the back. So, you know, my comment earlier about getting your planter level, you know, if your planter's tipped down in the front, your front's going to be lower, and your back unit or your closing wheels will be higher, and versus the other way. So you can see, to get your consistent depth, how getting that planter leveled is a big part of it, and or else you're fighting yourself trying to get things leveled up and get your consistent depth. Here's just a close-up of the residue management with the no-till calders. A lot of guys have taken these no-till calders off their planters and don't like to run them. It's on my planters. I like them, especially when I'm doing some no-till corn on corn. And as I've no-tilled and ran the cover crops, the soil environments got easier to work with and better to work with, and I'm able to get my planter adjusted to perform in those conditions. This is a type of closing wheels. It's a spike closing wheels. I'm running these on my planter. I like how it closes the trench. They don't wrap up. They worked well for us. Again, there's a lot of different systems to use back here. The thought is you can run these with a little less down pressure, which is a benefit, to not put a lot of pressure on that seed or compact that soil trench. The idea is this is kind of helping to break down break down your sidewall, if you do get to have any sidewall compaction, to break that down and also close your trench. Here's just a shot out the front of the window from that other photo there. You can see the row marker there. I don't have auto steer, but yeah, as you can see, I'm still able to get the row marked. It gets a little hypnotizing when the wind blows and the cover crop's waving around. You have to get off and slap your face around a little bit, wake you up, but it's doable. Again, the planting beans here, they do have a notched row or notch row marker that can be a little more aggressive to help you see your row, as a thought, if you don't have auto steer. Again, this is that same year, planting green, making green with the green machine. I guess you just can't see Dad off to the side shaking his head. I guess this was his first rodeo and mine, with real tall cover crops like this. I guess he's been shaking his head at me for 56 years, so another few days or weeks through this. Like I said, when planting green, I don't have this, I have less problems with the cover crop wrapping up on the equipment, I guess. If you terminate, over the years, I've done different termination, and when it's terminated early or pre-plant, that can wrap around equipment more and it flows through better when planting green. So this is the same field then that the tractor was in. Because of the late planting date and the development of the rye, this was sprayed shortly after planting, and with just a burn down and a pre-emergent herbicide. But you know, the picture here, what I wanted to show is just notice how the cover crop just falls apart and doesn't lodge and go down and cover up your soybeans. And so that's a positive, and you can already see, you look at that ground cover and canopy cover and what that's doing for weed suppression there. So now we're going to jump up to same year, 2019, Iowa, 3 miles from the Minnesota border. Of course, you can see a great earlier in the season, but yet a big difference in cover crop development. It's been kind of fun to work at both, or to be farming at both places, and the differences in cover crop development and management. It adds a little different twist to it. So basically, this is planting into fall drilled cereal rye about mid-May. This picture here, you know, the cover crop, you may say, well, they look a little thin, but I just wanted to show the soybeans emerging here. That's why I took this picture. Now, this is the picture that kind of got after my experience in that earlier in the season in Illinois and planting into that cover crop. And by the way, that year, in 2019, my soybean yields in Illinois were 50, 60, mid 60, 70 bushel beans doing that. So that's what really piqued my interest to maybe step out and experiment a little bit with late termination up here in Iowa. But you know, this picture here, you can see how quickly that residue broke down when it was killed in the vegetative stage. And you know, this is an excellent picture here of nutrient cycling. And when that rye was killed in the low seed to end ratio, and this was following a 200 plus bushel corn crop. The stalks were not chopped with a corn chopper or anything, or didn't residue managed any way. To me, this is a big part of how you get the no-till system, cover crop system working. You know, and in my opinion, the first 3 years, you kind of get the water cycling working and it improves. And then in year 4 and 5, you get the nutrient cycling working. And that's one of the reasons why we've talked in a lot of speeches about a good way to get into this system is to start with the cover crops ahead of the soybeans. And if you look at that in a corn bean rotation, you're going to have 3 out of your first 5 years will be soybeans. Can help condition the soil, get the system working. You know, corn can have some different challenges with cover crop management, and we'll get into that. And basically this last year, you know, I'm into it now about 5 years and had my best yields on my farm here in Iowa with 10 inches less rainfall than normal. So I'm just ecstatic at how it's turned the corner and how everything's working. So then we're going to jump to 20. Just here's Illinois again. This was the cover crop development at planting. So just a little different world down there. I can plant green, but then spray shortly after planting and get good cover crop growth down there. So it's nice to have a little bit of both work. I'm just to kind of set the stage for what I'm going to show here in Iowa and what I'm doing here. I'm interseeding cover crops into my corn the year before, of course, the beans, and with urea at side dressed urea at like the V5, V7 stage. So as you can see, here's some annual ryegrass, buckwheat, brass, and then what I do is I did follow this up and fall seed at cereal rye. So here we're going to jump forward, and this was my 2020 soybean field here in Iowa. So I went in and planted this, and I was done planting this before the 1st of May, no-tilled into this cereal rye. And waited till June 13th to spray it. And so the soybeans are coming up through there. They were a little hard to see, and I'm sorry I didn't get a real good picture of that. I mean to do that. And then I waited to spray this at the first trifoliate stage with a 1-pass burn down and post-emergent residual herbicide program. I've had some people ask, of course, about the crop insurance. I've gotten 5 years of yield data now with this type of management. There's language in there that talks about if your yields are established with cover crop management. And I guess a person's just going to have to come to peace with what they do with crop insurance. I guess for me, it's become more of an expense than a benefit. I haven't used it. I'm building soil health. Yields are responding, building organic matter. I'm not having any problems with yields, no problem with insect diseases, green bridge, all the soil health system builds resiliency. You know, nature has figured this out using untreated seed, not spraying insecticides or fungicide, $27 an acre 1-pass herbicide program. And I guess a lot of different ways, and yields are good. Here's just a picture then after termination. It was interesting with this type of management and the delayed termination, the soybeans actually elongated, which actually got the first node off the ground, which actually was a benefit at harvesting. So, you know, that was one of the side benefits I didn't see coming. My custom operators that do my soil or do my harvesting, basically their comment was these beans did as good as anything they were on for the same type of soils, and you know, I do have wildlife pressure, and with everything considered, everything was just as good as anything they were on that last year. This is a picture of just this yesterday, March 25th here, 3 miles from the Minnesota border. So you can see that's winter camelina there. I wanted to show some winter camelina coming up through the residue, but I also wanted to just share, you know, you look at the late termination from the year before and helping to meet the soil health principles with ground cover. And you can see some of that rye residue there from last summer, and how that's still sticking around and helping with my ground cover and protection. The only harvest problem that we ran into with this is when toward night or dark, the humidity comes up on these fields, and it does shut down planting or harvesting a little earlier. It gets a little tough, so you just can't really run it dark with this, is what we found out. I guess, like they say, we're not supposed to stumble around in the dark anyway, so it's just a good time to go home, eat, go to bed, wake up, and start going when the sun's shining, unless you get a rain or a dew and get your farmer vacation for a few hours then. So okay, so I also did in 2020 the spring seeded oats and also cereal rye. This was seeded March 13th last year. What we'd call frost seeding. So the snow had melted and then the ground was frozen. The co-op come and spread this in with a little P&K in March. About 60-pound totals between the cereal rye and the oats. My plan in 2021 is to do this same type management on a couple fields, but also add pollinator species in with this, buckwheat and rape with the oats. One of the reasons why I'm trying to get the winter camelina is to maybe get that winter camelina to also bloom and be a pollinator. I did in my interseeding in the corn included crimson clover, hoping maybe that shows up in the spring or summer here before I terminate it. Also had a lot of winter annuals or flowering plants like dandelions. Of course, you know, one person may, you know, say that, you know, that's be horror for them to have that out there. But when we were out there, me, Neil, Jake, and we're out there, Hillary, we're out there, boy, the insect population that was buzzing around these fields was tremendous. Okay. And so there, last year in this area, there was a little bit of a soybean outbreak. And of course, everybody was scrambling and running around wanting to spray everything, kill everything. And I went out to this field in particular here and peeled back the soybeans at that time and was just full of ladybugs, turned around, walked back out of the field. So, you know, it's a system approach. And that's the thing working with people over the years is this is a system approach. And unfortunately, I think too many of us are getting in the way to, you know, get your cover crops in, no-till, try to manage your cover crops with whatever your comfort level is on these terminations like we're talking about. And just don't get in the way of trying to manage to, you know, get in the way of some things. Well, this was after termination on about that June 13th, after that first trifoliate stage. Again, it was interesting that the nutrient cycling of the cover crop of the oats and how it broke down fairly quick in the vegetative stage, and probably could have waited another week or two on this. So with the oat development, have to consider that in the future. Okay, here's my field with this type of management, and I guess what do you see or what don't you see out there? And that's weeds. Okay, my cover crop's my pre-emergent herbicide program. I've had discussion with a lot of people about this later or delayed termination here in soybeans. Of course, the conversation kind of goes, what are you doing for your pre-emergent herbicide program? Well, I wait and I spray it, you know, in the mid-June with post-emergence and a Roundup. And well, then they say, well, they can't do that because they got to get their pre's down. And And they can't do it because they got water hemp. And I'm like, well, I don't have water hemp. And they say, well, we can't do this because we've got water hemp. And I say, you don't understand. I don't have water hemp. You know, they're defending the company strategy on weed control. And well, quite frankly, the company strategy on weed control isn't working. You know, this is a direct $27 an acre, one pass herbicide program, not a weed in the field. I guess, again, making green. How else do you say it? Just to add a little credibility to what I'm doing the thing that we say we can't do, and that's corn on corn no-till. I end up doing a little of that every year, and that's when I do like that no-till colder on my planter. Basically, I think it's important to clean the row out good when you're going corn on corn no-till, or corn in general, even when we're planting green, and we're going to get into that. Try to stagger the row. You know, further development, biggest thing is, you know, even planting green and corn on corn, biggest thing is nitrogen management, nitrogen from different sources times a year. I do use starter. I do put some urea in with my P&K spring applied, side dressing, put a little on with pre-emergent herbicide program, 32%. So multiple applications of nitrogen different times of the year, still shooting to, you know, be at your extension rate amounts total with all of it. Just another photo of further development in the corn on corn here. I guess it can be done if a person just kind of thinks through the processes and sticks with the plan. Okay, here's corn. Neil sent me these photos of there. I usually corn plant and your hair's on fire, and I just haven't taken time to get off the planter to take some pictures. But yeah, I've no-tilled corn into cereal rye like this. Basically, here again, I'll just just say that you want to clean your row out. You can see where the row cleaners have cleaned the row out and brushed the residue back there. I plant green into corn like this. I like to get on it pretty quick. After corn, a different thing. I like to get on it pretty fast and get it killed. The soybeans, a different thing. I think we got a lot of opportunity to delay termination on the soybeans, but corn, I'd like to get this killed pretty quick. I will back up and say on a comment on the soybeans. So if you think through that picture where we spring seeded those oats and no-tilled those soybeans into it, okay, that's a soybean, a legume into a cool season grass, oats, cover crop. We used to call that nurse crop when we did it with alfalfa. I don't think this is a great stretch to no-till and plant soybeans into cover crops like that, and then manage the later termination. And then I just haven't seen a negative effect to yield, and only getting positives out of it so far. I'm sure there's something around the corner that's going to, it's farming. Something may come up at some point. You're just going to have to adjust and move on the go. But I have nothing but positive to say about it. I'm already seeing increased organic matter in my fields from my soil tests, like Jake documented. Already increased to 0.5% in only 5 years, something that we used to not think we could do. Seeing holding the field, you talk about no erosion, all the other benefits that come with it. Here's just again, in especially corn is when you're no-tilling and planting green, is just getting your seed trench closed up well, and very important part of that. And here's just a further field of after termination. Again, I like to get these cover crops killed right at planting when I'm doing corn, either side of it a few days. Being it's a grass on a grass, just have work with your nitrogen management. You got your good ground coverage. This is, then we'll jump into the next photo. Here's a photo of what you've got for ground coverage when you're allow that cover crop to develop and plant green, getting those benefits. This is just a photo of further development here, that corn into these cover crop planting green. This is maybe getting pretty close to the time that I would side dress the urea and interseed my cover crops into this, just to give you a kind of an idea of timing on that. Trying to get okay, if I'm going to terminate my cover crop early at planting when you're no-tilling your corn green is trying to find a way to maybe get them back into this system a little sooner in the growing season instead of waiting until after harvest to try to get those benefits. So with that, I guess is like it says, got the green smiley face. Make a great day. It's been fun. It's been fun working with my dad. It's you know, I give him a lot of credit for working with me and being patient with me. It's been a good give and take. Maybe we probably couldn't have got along like this 20 years ago. So maybe it's a good thing I wasn't able to start farming with him till I'm a little older and grayer, but been fun. So Neil, let you take over.
I appreciate it, Todd. That was a lot of great pictures, a lot of great info. You know, I like the green theme. That's kind of fun. We're starting to green up here, so nice job. Really nice job. Any pick? There is a question or two in there maybe for you, Todd, in the chat box. If you want to answer them for folks, that'd be great. Any last questions for Todd or Jake before we wrap it up here? They are happy to answer questions for y'all as well, so feel free to reach out to them if you're wondering about anything. I really want to thank you guys for sharing today what you've done on your farms. Muchas gracias, gentlemen. Very nice. I want to thank all our guests through these 6 episodes of Coffee Talk. This is the last one of the winter season, so really appreciate y'all tuning in since January. Hopefully you learn a thing or two. You know, my goal really for all of it was just to share, you know, what any of us are doing, or what's timely, what are we wondering about, what do we need, you know, and hopefully you can take that back with you to your offices, to your fields, to your farmers, to the counter, and implement it. You know, even if it's just one thing. You know, I really hope there was something presented this winter that you can take home and implement. So, and I really want to thank you all for tuning in. You know, if you have any ideas or thoughts or things we could do better, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to take criticism of any kind. So going forward, I think our hope is to get back to the field and back to field days and in-field type trainings and in-field type things, and see and share and experience and get the full experience. So stay tuned. Soil Health will be coming to a farm near you. And with that, thanks again, everybody. Have a great Friday and have a great weekend.